Call the Winona County Board of Adjustment January 17th meeting to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have introductions. Wendy, would you like to start?
My name is Wendy Larson. I live in Homer Township.
I'm Cherie Hales. I'm recently moved into Winona from our farm in Wiscoy Valley.
Phil Schwantz, Mount Vernon Township.
Larry Graydon, dairy farm with my family in Mount Vernon Township.
Rachel Stahl, I live in Wiscoy Township.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of agenda. I'm seeking for a motion to approve, or are there any additions or corrections?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made by Larry, seconded by Cherie. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Next order of business is approval of December 20th, 2018 minutes. They were included in your pack and also in your binder. Looking for any additions, corrections, or motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Second.
Cherie moved, seconded by Larry to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is election of officers, which will be conducted by Kay.
Well, welcome to the first meeting of the Board of Adjustments for 2019. During this meeting, we elect a chair and a vice chairperson from the members, and they shall serve terms of 1 year each and be elected at this first meeting. Any vacancy created during the term is filled by a special election for the remainder of the term. As Planning and Environmental Services Director, I'm the recording secretary. That's why I'm standing up here doing this. The process is to nominate one or more candidates, and the nominations need not be seconded, and they're undebatable. The candidates are all nominated first until the nominations close, and then voted upon in order. Before proceeding to the election, I'll check to see if there's any other nominations and then close it. After the election, and someone is elected, if the candidate's present, they immediately take the gavel and become chair, and then we vote for vice chair just prior to that as well. For the chair, are there any nominations at this time?
I would like to nominate Cherie Hales.
For the chair, are there any other nominations at this time? Are there any other nominations for chair at this time? For the vice chair, are there any nominations?
I'll take that one.
Larry? I would nominate Larry for vice chair.
All right. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? All right. For the position of chair, the nominee is Cherie Hales. All of those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Madam Chair. For vice chair, for Larry Graydon, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Vice Chair Graydon. All right, Cherie, if you want to take over the gavel, and the rest of the meeting is yours. Thank you.
Well, the next item on the agenda would be to select a liaison to the Planning Commission. And so do we have any nominations for that?
I'd like to nominate Cherie.
Do we have any other nominations?
I would nominate Larry Graydon.
Any other? So, do we do this by, a voice vote then, Kay? Is this how we proceed?
Yes, and this is for a recommendation to the county board.
Correct. And do we need motions or seconds with this? No? Yes?
I would proceed with motions and seconds for it, yes.
Okay.
We have. Sorry. You've been around the phone. Sorry, I've got a cold. I'm a little bit under the weather. I'm not hearing you well.
Okay.
So
I'm a little unclear if we have to do this with motions and seconds. Or just.
that's
vote.
probably the best practice. So Rachel Stoll nominated you, Cherie.
Correct.
So maybe start at that
So,
point.
So we need a motion, that would be, Rachel, that would be her motion, correct?
Correct.
So we need a second.
I second. I'll second.
All right. I'm sorry to be so clumsy with this, but I've never done this before. So then would we do the same for Larry's nomination, and then we vote?
In the order that you received them.
Okay, do we vote on the first one first, or?
Just take the nominations in order first, and then vote for starting with the first one.
Okay,
Just clarification on that, Clay. This isn't our decision to make. We're just making nominations, are we not correct?
You're making a recommendation to the county board.
right.
So we can't recommend two people?
Usually not.
No.
In the past, that has taken place where there was, I believe, only 4 members were available for the Board of Adjustment meeting, and it was a 2-2 split. And so they decided unanimously to send both names to the county board for decision. But ordinarily, it would be a majority of a single recommendation.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have a second for Larry's nomination for liaison to planning?
I'll second it.
Okay, so, let's see, all in favor of myself being the liaison, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And in favor of Larry's being liaison, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Then I think that I will send my name, Sri Hales, to planning as our recommendation for the liaison, and they will make their decision.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now we will move on to the rules of procedure, annual review and adoption. I think we all got those in our packets.
Tag team for this with Assistant County Attorney Nuttall. So there's a section in your book that starts with policy, and the current list of advisory committees and the role and purpose of the advisory committees and so on. The rules of procedure for the Board of Adjustment were adjusted last year. I don't know that any changes were received by the Planning and Environmental Services Office. The only thing would be, it'd be useful for us, if we catch a typo or something like that, that would be the only change that, might be something to, for us to do. But I personally haven't seen anything, and I don't know if anyone else did in their review, so.
And I have a question on one of the things. I'm questioning under section 1.3, it says meetings shall be held in county boardroom or otherwise established by the Board of Adjustment. Special meetings shall be held at such places and shall be convenient to the matters under consideration at the meeting. I'm under the impression we're moving the meeting for our next monthly Board of Adjustment meeting. Given the limited space we have here, do we as a board have to okay that move, or that's over and above?
It would be helpful if you could do so. We put it at the bottom of the agenda as kind of the final thing to discuss, whether it's on the record or not. This room holds 96 people, and because it's during the business day, the counter still needs to be available, even though I could probably host another 24 people with a television set out in the hallway. But for the greater convenience of those that might want to speak, might want to attend the proceedings and so on, we double-checked to see if the Tao Center would be available, and it is during that time, and HBI could arrange to do the taping that we typically use as the permanent record. So that is the Planning Department's recommendation at this point. County Administrator Fritz recommended this to the department.
Okay, well, forgive me, but I don't see it on the agenda, Kate.
No.
I'm sorry that I should have amended the agenda appropriately. And if we wanted to amend the agenda to add it at the end, that would be excellent. Thank you for bringing that up.
Is there anything else to go through on rules, and then we will amend our agenda?
I have one more question. I'm
sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Now I'm under section 2, under organization 2.3. Second paragraph, about middle of the paragraph, where it talks about chairperson shall conduct meeting as efficiently as possible, shall remind members, witnesses, and petitioners to adhere to the subject at hand. The chairperson shall not move for action or second a motion. I don't know if we've always followed that.
Okay.
So I just want clarification. So the chairperson is not supposed to make a motion and or second a motion?
Generally not. I seem to recall, and I don't remember if it was this body or a different body that I was working with, where they removed the requirement that they not second a motion, that the motion come from somewhere else, but that a second could come from the chair. So if that's something that this body would like to amend the rules of procedure, they're welcome to do that. That's why we review this on an annual basis.
I just was looking for clarification, so that I'm playing by the rules.
Are people comfortable with what Attorney Nuttall said, that the chairperson can second? I know sometimes we end up being a group of 4, and it's Andy.
But I think under those situations, the rules tend to change. I mean, then if there's a quorum, well, I guess that would only apply if there's only a 3-person quorum. Then the chairperson becomes part of that quorum.
Yeah, that's the concern, is when you're talking about 3 people on a body, then, otherwise the other 2 are the only ones allowed to do business. So I know that's come up before, so if you want to amend the rules, you can do that.
Are you wanting to amend rules?
I'm fine with it.
Are there any other questions on rules and procedure?
I just wanted to give you a quick reminder, since we have 2 new faces on our Board of Adjustment, about the way that the procedures that we follow when we're dealing with new petitions. We will have the more in-depth training that we've got scheduled for February 7th now, so we'll be going over this more in depth. But for the purposes of today, The way it works is the docket gets called, the staff will make a presentation. Generally, we then have the petitioner allowed to speak. After that, the public hearing would get opened, and then anyone would have an opportunity to speak for or against the petition. Just a reminder to the chair, you get to call that 3 times, even on those ones where nobody's here and you're talking to an empty room. And then after that, the public hearing gets closed and you all will discuss. You should have in your packet, it was amended, I think, on Tuesday or yesterday, I forget which, draft findings of fact. You'll be getting those with all of your packets. They're based on the staff report. So essentially what's contained in the staff report either gets summarized or word for word put in as potential findings. You are welcome to amend those. These are just a draft as a starting point for you. If you disagree with them, you can do that. But that's just based on the staff report, that's just a preliminary draft for you to go through. You don't necessarily have to read each and every condition, but you should discuss them and make sure that you are applying the facts that are in the record, information that you have, whether that's people speaking at the microphone, information in your packets, or other information you have. Make sure that you're letting everyone else know what you're basing your decisions on, and that your findings are going to be based on the fact, because for the Board of Adjustment, each and every criteria must be met in order for an approval. If any one of those criteria is not met, then you should be denying a petition for a variance. So that's just your basic rules, but make sure you're having good discussions about the facts and how they relate to the criteria. Also, conditions that are attached at the end, those should be designed to make sure that criteria are being met. They just not necessarily arbitrary things that you want to see as part of it. They do need to relate to the reason why they're here. So any questions on that brief overview of how things work?
Sorry, I meant to ask for the okay and an motion and second and vote on the revision of the typos in the Rules of Procedure document. So I wanted to grab it so that you could note those changes on pages 15 and 17. We no longer have a sanitary inspector, and a couple of things were just typos.
I would make a motion to so move to accept.
And we have a second.
I second.
Moved by Phil and seconded by Wendy to correct typos in the document.
And also part of that motion is to accept these rules.
All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So now we will move on to the next item on the agenda.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, but I believe we need to amend the agenda.
An addition, there is an addition to the agenda.
I make a motion that we amend the agenda to have a point number 11, that we are in favor of moving the February Board of Adjustment meeting to a larger location.
Right. Is there a second to Phil's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Larry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Right. Thank you for bringing that up. So we'll add that at the end of the meeting before we adjourn. So now we'll hear the petition, which is BOA 117-1901. The petitioner seeks a variance from Section 8.5.1B of the Winona County zoning ordinance to allow a dwelling 130 feet from an existing feedlot instead of the required 500 feet. Chuck, do you have something for us?
Yes, I have something for everyone, and welcome new members. First of all, I'd like to start out with your page 23, and there was a mistake there. That was listed as Norton Township. It should be Warren Township. The petitioner was recommended to contact adjoining townships, but it is not in our ordinance. So,
What page number was that?
in your packet, it is page 23, and it's under township neighborhood comments.
Mine actually says Hillsdale.
Oh, really?
Town board. It says, it's halfway down the paragraph, it says Norton Township because of the close.
Right.
It says Norton Township twice, it should say.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a petition because the feedlot is relatively close to, the new dwelling would be relatively close to a feedlot, basically 130 feet instead of the recommended in the ordinance of 500 feet. This is just a larger view of the map of where it's going to be located. You can see the dot on the bottom here, that's where it's going to be located. If it is approved. This is a more detailed of that same area. This is where the planned location of the dwelling would be, and this is where the one feedlot would be. And so we're going to be measuring from this feedlot, this existing feedlot. This is the feedlot that we're referring to back to that other one. So that is that little shed right here, and that's what it looks like. Some of the difficulties with this would be if he was to put the dwelling 500 feet away from that, these slopes would be greatly increased. So these would be about 18 to 25%, and then he would need a variance or a conditional use also. Also, the difficulty would be to get the driveway there, and there would be quite a bit of land disturbance to get it 500 feet away from there. This is a bigger overall view, and again, for reference, this is the little shed or feedlot that we were referring to, and this is the larger area. And this is a picture from Bridgeview Road looking southeast. Any questions?
Chuck, I have one. What is the distance from the regular, more normal-looking feedlot to the site versus that little shed?
Approximately 466 feet.
Thank you.
So the small shed, is this actually in use?
Yes, it is in use.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Chuck? Thank you. So do we have a motion to open the public hearing?
I believe you, Madam Chair, you
We
need
should
to.
let the parties speak first, the petitioner, I think.
Okay. Mr. Compton? Yes. Will you just state your name and address for the record?
I'm Jeff Compton, the petitioner. I live 1031 West Wabasha Street in Winona. Thank you for this opportunity. And because we have some new board members, as well as for the benefit of all of us here, I'd like to briefly summarize the background. About 25 years ago, in 1993, I was looking for a site to build a house out of town for my family. We raised 3 boys. And my parcel came on the market. After verifying that I could build on it, I bought it, with the only practical building site being on the west end. The building site is a field of about, I think it's about 1.5 acres. It had been cultivated until I bought it, Then it was mowed for hay up until about 3 years ago. Now it's returning to prairie. So this acre and a half has not been cultivated really for 25 years. The parcel was created as a building lot, and it's been recognized by the county and gradually taxed increasingly as a building lot since that time that I bought it. And then due to various life circumstances, we never built on it, obviously. In about 2012, the new ordinance was adopted requiring, in my case, a variance to build within 500 feet of a registered feedlot. Then time went on, and I realized that at this stage in life I'm not going to build. My boys are not interested in it. And so I decided to sell. About a year and a half ago, I had a prospective buyer, and we applied for a variance as I'm doing today. It was denied primarily because it was felt that my buyer, or perhaps his buyer in the future, might possibly be able to object or hinder my southern neighbor in any plans he might have for his feedlot. Since that denial, the situation has changed. My southern neighbor, Dave Erickson, has had his feedlot redefined such that his future plans are protected from potential hindrance by me or any new buyer building next door to him. So now I have another potential buyer, Mr. Trevor Menting, who's sitting right here, and he wants to buy my parcel and build a house for his family, have a garden, maybe some chickens, as I wanted to do in 1993. But we need the variance to go forward. Trevor and his family understand that as newcomers to an A/RC zoned agricultural area, that they must expect and accept normal agricultural sounds, smells, activities, and whatnot. In the neighborhood, they understand, accept, and agree to this. So, since the major objection has been removed, I earnestly ask the board to grant us this variance so that I may sell and the Mentings can buy and build on the only practical spot on the parcel, a parcel recognized and taxed as a buildable lot for the last 25 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. Right. Do I have a
Open it up to the public.
Pardon? Yes. Do we have a motion to open the meeting, the public hearing?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Phil. Is there anyone who would wish to speak for or against this petition?
Madam Chair, you need to vote on the motion.
Pardon?
You need to vote on the motion.
There's a lot to this. All in favor of opening the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The public hearing is open. If anyone would like to speak for or against this petition, please come to the podium and state your name and address.
Good afternoon. My name is David Erickson. I am the owner of the farm that sits directly south of the property line here. I am here really just to make sure that my interests are protected. I've talked with Mr. Compton in detail on this, and I told him I'm not going to really take a strong position against or a position for it, and for a number of reasons. At the last hearing, the issue really arose upon the fact on what was the full definition of my feedlot. We've been able to work with the county to get that updated. And so it's my understanding that if the variance is granted, they'll be building within 130 feet of an established feedlot. If I was to change facilities or change any buildings, any direction from that shed moving towards my facility, I wouldn't be restricted in that or need a variance because I'd be staying within that defined feedlotted location. Correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the information that was sent, that's what the rules say. Since this hearing came up, I've got numerous phone calls from neighbors, from township members, from Warren Township, kind of in strong opposition to it. Everett Rolfing, who is on the township for Warren Township, which is my township in the southern part, actually called me again this morning, wanted to be here, but couldn't be here. He has strong opposition against it on a personal level. He said he cannot speak on behalf of Warren Township because they were never given the opportunity to fully have a hearing on it as a full township and decide how it would matter. At the last time that we had this hearing, after the hearing was denied, there was some concern with the townships that why wasn't Warren Township notified in the situation. They had an Association of Townships meeting. At that Association of Townships meeting, they had a resolution that moving forward, if there was to be a variance that was going to affect neighboring townships, that both townships should be notified. At the hearing was county officials that said they weren't opposed to it as long as it was put on the petitioner to make sure to make those notices. The county wasn't going to be the ones to go out and make the notices. It's my understanding at this point when Mr. Compton went for a variance, he was informed, as Mr. Zwainer has also notified, that if it would be nice and polite for him to notify. So Mr. Compton contacted me and said, you know Everett very well, would you talk with him? I called Everett, and Everett said, well, wait a minute. We should be reviewing this as a full hearing. We should be notified on this. Why weren't we notified? I believe there was some miscommunication that was relayed to Mr. Compton on this issue. So that's one of the reasons why Everett is strongly opposing it, is because they didn't have a chance as a township to hear and see what would be affecting on a property there. He also opposes it on public health purposes. He says, why are we building within 130 feet of an established feedlot? Don't we have that rule for public health purposes, right? He also said that he believes that there needs to be more explanation of financial hardship, and we need to prove a true hardship in this situation. I wish he was here to expand on that more. He also said that he feels it's unfair to me as the property owner, that in the future will have to seek a variance or a conditional use permit to upgrade above 50 animal units if I desire to do that. Right now I'm within about 800 feet or 900 feet of another residence, be Mr. Fisher. It'd be a lot easier at that point to argue a 1,000-foot setback when you're only within 900 feet versus 130 feet. Not my intention at this point, and I believe I have a mandate to live at peace with all men, and I believe at this point we've protected my existing feedlot to do it, right? I do have some concerns, not so much with Mr. Menting, but if Mr. Menting ever sold the property in the future. I noticed that you saw a photograph of the feedlot. When I had submitted the updated information, I included a number of photographs of that shed. One of that photographs showed the whole herd of cattle surrounding that shed. The calves love that shed in the summertime. We put a feeder in there. Animals go in and out of it. It is a small shed. I will grant that to you. The thing is that's on the north side of our pasture, and it's very well shaded. So I want to make sure that Mr. Menting knows that he's going to, for most of the summer, have a large herd of cows 130 feet from his house. All right? And they do have flies. They do stink, okay? He'll technically be building closer to my feedlot than my house sits next to my animal unit buildings. And so my concern is not so much with him, but if he ever sells in the future, I don't want to have to deal with litigation and deal with a lawsuit because people are complaining about drift or a smell or flies. Hey, that comes with the territory. And so that's, I guess, where I'm at. I just want to make sure I am protected moving forward. I'm not going to take a position for or against it. I feel for Mr. Compton that I feel bad that he has this piece of property that he purchased. I know the rules have changed. I know a numerous number of my neighbors are not excited about having another person up there. We worry about what precedent this may cause, but I'm also not going to restrict him from being able to sell his property. And that's kind of what I wanted to say today.
Thank you, Mr. Exon. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against this petition?
I'm Jim Fisher. We are neighbors up here. We live at 21932 Ridgeview Road. We would be the people that would share a well with the landowners of this particular parcel. We understood that clearly when we bought the land, so that is not any part of my concern. I accept that fully. I guess my concern is something that David just kind of brought up in passing almost, is that there is this restriction on building within 500 feet of a feedlot. This is only 130 feet away, and it seems to me that if a variance is granted, there should be we should be able to articulate a pretty good reason why this this restriction doesn't apply in this case. I'm not arguing against this lot per se. My concern is that I'm afraid that it sets a precedent, and we live across from some pretty nice, flat, buildable land that has great views that make wonderful building lots. I just want to be assured that granting this variance isn't going to set a precedent that would allow others to come in with requests that would allow them to build. I mean, it seems to me that when these zoning laws went into effect, there was blood in the streets. I mean, there was a lot of controversy. There was a lot of hard feeling. The laws were made, and if we're going to step away from them, and I'm not saying we shouldn't. Please understand, I'm not saying that we shouldn't. I'm just saying that if you do grant the variance, please make sure that you can articulate a good reason for doing so. Thank you.
I have a question, sir.
Yes.
On our map, you're much closer to the proposed dwelling than, or it looks like you have a shed. Do you have a feedlot on your property?
No.
Is there a shed there? It looks like it could be a...
You're probably looking at the Quonset that is right next to this property. That is not ours.
Oh, okay.
There's a little exception that is about 75 feet wide that Quonset is on.
So that's between you and this parcel?
Yes. Although further back, we do about the parcel.
But the water for this parcel would be fed from you?
Yes.
And you're in agreement with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against this petition?
Hello, I'm Scott Miller, 22059 Ridgeview Road, and I am echoing the concerns of Mr. Fisher insofar as we create laws and set up a certain ordinance, and then we're within 1/3 of that ordinance in this place. They're set up for health purposes, and I believe that this is extremely close. 485 feet is negotiable, but when you get down to being 130 feet, 135 plus or minus, it seems like it's in the scope of what the intention of the ordinance was set up for. So I oppose it on that ground that we should, we're a nation of, rule of law kind of thing, and we need to make sure that everyone's protected. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would want to speak for or against this petition?
Do we have the feedlot officer? Is that you, huh? Okay. I just want to get clarification on Mr., I'm sorry, Erickson.
Yep.
So if he decides to improve his existing feedlot, which is now, the boundaries have somewhat changed from what we originally were told, or clarify that whole scenario?
He wanted to include the loafing shed as part of the feedlot, which is clearly right on the parcel boundary line, which does not meet the 20-foot setback. So he would still have to get a variance because it's a legal nonconformity, or he would have to move that from because it's a 20-foot setback from the parcel boundary line that he needs to meet. So to improve it or go up, he would need a permit and a variance.
Just that particular feedlot or the main feedlot?
The whole thing is considered one feedlot. That's just the boundary, because it's not two feedlot sites.
Okay. So by granting this variance, it would enforce him to, would he have to get a variance?
He would have to get it anyway, because he is still on the boundary line.
Okay.
The variance he would need to get, should he decide to expand, would be a setback variance because of the property line.
Yep, it's currently still a legal nonconformity, so he would have to get a variance from the legal nonconformity setbacks.
Okay, any other questions for Carly?
Thank you for doing that. And then maybe, if I may, a question maybe for Eric. When they talk about this right to farm law, and if that's part of the package, so to speak, that the variance would say if it were to pass, does that go right on the title of the property? I mean, if the property changes hands, they're buying a piece of property with that on their title?
With the conditions that we've recommended, if you do approve this variance, number 4 is part of that approval, and your action becomes a recorded deed document downstairs that is placed on the property. So it runs in perpetuity. So any future owner that acquires that property will see that on a certain date, Winona County Board of Adjustment took this action with this stipulation. So therefore, yes, it does run with the property regardless.
Stephanie, I just have a question about procedure because I'm new at this. In this portion, in this public hearing part of this meeting, is this when we ask questions of individuals? And Mr. Erickson would like to say something again. Is this all okay? How does this work?
With the questions, it's generally, if it relates to what the speaker has said, you can do follow-up questions as part of that. If it's additional information you want to get, you should probably save that for discussion.
Okay.
And it's up to the chair whether to allow people to speak more than once.
Right. Mr. Erickson, you have something else to tell us?
My apologies for coming up again. I just want to get clarity on this because what the feedlot officer has indicated seems to be inconsistent with setback subdivision 85.1 standards. This was provided to all the, the notices. It says pre-existing feedlots not meeting the specified setback requirements shall allow it to be restocked and expanded so long as the restocking and or expansion of the feedlot does not further decrease the existing and established distances between the feedlot and neighboring dwellings. So it's my understanding that if the outermost point of my feedlot is that loafing shed, if I build a facility within that direction farther away, I'm not restricted and should not require a variance, right? Because they would be building with an existing feedlot. Just because that building isn't 20 feet back, that was in place long before the 20-foot setback rule was put into place, so therefore it would be grandfathered in. If I'm incorrect on that, then unfortunately I have to strongly, vehemently oppose.
I would like clarification on that myself.
I wouldn't consider myself able to answer that question.
Maybe I can add to that.
Thank you.
The setback for all structures is 20 feet from the side yard property line. It is a non-conforming structure. It's allowed to continue, but if he removes that, he would have to meet at least a 20-foot setback from the side yard property line. The feedlot setback by this action has been addressed. So the part that we've addressed is the feedlot setback, but just like any other structure that is sitting on the top of the property line, if they replace it or want to build new, they would have to meet that setback.
With the variance or without a variance?
With just 20 feet, or if they want to build it right on top of the property line again, there would have to be a variance from the side yard property line setback.
So just to be clear, I apologize. If I put a facility, tear this building down, replace this facility, make it larger, put a facility out here or anywhere there, I'm more than 130 feet away from the proposed dwelling. I would not need to get a variance for a setback to put a building right here from that property. Is that correct?
Correct.
Just want to make sure the record's clear on that. Okay.
Okay, but now I thought the feedlot officer told me no matter what you did, you were going to have to get a variance.
Yeah.
If he goes over the 50 animal units, then the setback variance is 1,000 feet, which would need a variance from the other dwelling that's already there.
But an improvement of facilities,
Improvement is not an expansion, that's like a replacement, so that would be expanding your feedlot, and if any animal unit number went up, then you would need a permit and a variance, but to replace it is fine.
so all of this area between line fence and building site right there right now is considered feedlot?
Yes, it's pasture, open lot, yeah.
So he could build anywhere in there as long as he wasn't expanding animal units without a variance?
Yeah, he would just need a permit, so the animal units could not go up.
Does that help? It helps me.
That helps me a lot. That's much better clarification. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Trevor Menting, the one that plans on building there. I just thought I would speak for myself. I do appreciate that everyone's concerned about my health, my family's health, or any future buyer's health being so close to a feedlot. Particularly what Mr. Miller brought up, being that it's extremely close to a feedlot. I guess the reason I feel like an exception would be okay in this circumstance is that the main feedlot is much further away. The small thing that's considered a feedlot right on the property line there, if that was just a feeding station or it just happened to be where the cows like to be in the shade, and there was no building there considered a feedlot, to me that would be the same thing, where the cows are going to be there no matter what, because that's where the shade is going to be. And so I guess for me personally and for my family, that's why we don't consider an extreme closeness of a feedlot any more than we would be if it was just the main building.
Thank you.
And where's the township line? The red line? So that's Hillsdale and Warren are joined right there. You're in Warren.
Yes.
This new, your land is in Hillsdale.
I would like to note in this part of the public hearing that, to remind people, we did get a letter from a resident on Ridgeview Road. Let's see, Dr. Lisa Schnepper. Everyone have a chance to look at that, just to make sure that that was read into the record. A primary concern that allows for a building within 500 feet of a feedlot. As a healthcare professional, I believe the purpose of the regulation regarding setbacks is to protect the health and well-being of the residents of Winona County. She questions why this variance would be considered, and just worries about the health of individuals. So just to make sure everyone had a chance to see that. Is there anyone else who would like to speak for or against this petition? Anyone else who would like to speak for or against this petition? And for the third time, would anyone like to speak for or against this petition? Hearing none, Do we have a motion to close the public hearing? Moved by Phil.
No, moved by Larry, seconded by Phil.
Moved by Larry, seconded by Phil. The public hearing is closed. I'll get this. All in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? The public hearing is now closed. So, is there any discussion or questions, additional questions for presenters?
I have questions.
Pardon?
I have a couple questions. I just wanted to ask Mr. Menting, it does say that you agreed to this statement that is going to be a condition put in here about the inconvenience and discomfort, from normal accepted agricultural practices, and that you agreed, you understood that. But I'm wondering, I just want to get confirmed that, and well, first I might want to ask the staff or somebody else, it says, and possible injury from normal operations. What possible injury might he be subject to from the normal agricultural operations of the neighbor?
Well, cattle getting out in the middle of the night, damage to their property, to their garden, to odors, during busy times of year, planting, tillage, harvesting, operation of machinery, lack of sleep, things of that nature, things that you would experience if you're living out in the agricultural district.
So machinery, like on the road, might be?
Well, I mean, during the busy time of season, there's agricultural equipment that could be running at all hours. So it's different than living in the urban area. So I think there's all kinds of unpredictabilities that could be associated with that.
Okay.
I'm not going to finger one specific injury of any kind, but living out in an agricultural setting, you may experience any number of activities. Be prepared. There could be more traffic, there could be more equipment on the road, there could be different hours of operation, but anytime you have dealing with animals or livestock, there's always going to be a level of unpredictability of what they're going to do to them.
So if there's an injury from machinery on the road, Mr. Menting would not be able to, he'd be barred from obtaining a legal judgment?
That's a whole different can of worms. That would be something that if there was something of that nature going on, I think council would be probably involved on both sides. That's not really something that we can deal with from the county's perspective.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Actually, I have another question.
Okay.
Sorry. There's the two maps that we have there's illustration on both of the maps of the proposed building, and they don't line up. I mean, they're not consistent with each other. One shows the building across and in line with the Quonset hut on Mr. Loke's property, but the other one shows it and lined up with the property line between Fishers and Loke, or however it's pronounced. So there's that, but also there might be an issue with the well because of the water line. I believe I talked to Mr. Fisher yesterday, and he said that the well person he talked to said that the most direct route for the water line would be through his septic field, and then any other, and that wouldn't be acceptable, but that any other route would be very, very long or under the road. I mean, it wasn't a really good.
Am I allowed to speak or answer?
Yes.
The quotes I've gotten from excavators suggested doing a directional boring, which would go under Mr. Lauk's driveway. It would not disturb any of the Fisher's property, and
Is Mr. Lauk aware of that?
I did have a chance to talk to him a couple months ago about me buying it, and at the time I thought we were going to be trenching through his driveway. He didn't have a problem with that, and so I assumed doing the boring and not disturbing it would be no problem at all, but of course I would have to get permission.
Thank you.
Mr. Menting, would this trenching go in front of the Quonset hut then?
Yes, that'd be the shortest distance, and since we're doing the directional boring 6 feet underground, we would just be under the driveway of Lauk's and the Fishers.
Thank you.
I'd like to address the map concern. The map that I drew up from the, this was taken from the dimensions of the petition. So I just took it on the GIS and measured it as accurately as I could from the distance that was given. The other one was from the applicant. So this map was as accurately as I could draw it.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
If I could just comment on that, I think that when I talked to the trencher, just to be clear, he felt like the most direct route would be along the road. I do have a question about that, and I don't know if you folks can answer it or not, but I am assuming that there is a right-of-way off that road of 33 feet, and our house is very close to the road. So I'm guessing that if you went that route, which is the way I would go if I were paying for it, with the county or the township or whoever has that right of way, would they allow that trenching or the directional boring to take place in the right of way?
Thank you. Chuck?
It would be up to the respective township.
And this would be?
Hillsdale.
Okay.
That's really not our concern.
Pardon?
That's really not our concern as far as this petition.
Should that be made a condition then?
Why?
Well, because if it's not approved, it wouldn't,
If it's not approved, he's going to dig a well.
he would, for sure.
Well, either that or pale water, one or the other.
Are you aware, Mr. Trevor, that you might have to dig a well?
In the back of my mind, I always knew that was a possibility, but if it wasn't part of the plans at this point.
Okay, thank you.
There's something Mr. Erickson said, just raised a question for me, and that was about township notification, which I had a little trouble following all of that. But, you know, we did, in our packet, we had one township notification, the one the parcel is in, but the other township wasn't notified, and that's usual. How did?
It's not legal, legally.
The notification requirements are required by state statute. We must follow that to a strict letter as far as the local unit of government that has jurisdiction on that. We are aware of the request as far as when you have adjacent properties. Neighbors that are within a certain vicinity all receive individual notices as part of this variance request. If there is neighboring local units of government, there is a requirement that if something is within, I believe, 1 mile of a city limits, that the city is notified, especially for development type requests. We had stated to the petitioners that this had come up previously under the previously requested variance, and that it would be a good idea or courtesy to give give that township no additional notification, but we're under no obligations statutorily to do so. We would have to amend the county zoning ordinance, but then the parameters of that would have to be set up. It's just like if it's immediately adjacent or within 500 feet. We run into this, I think, on a lot of number of issues where there could be a neighboring county. In that case, we do notify the neighbors. We do have to contact other counties to get that data. But yeah, we're obligated to whatever the project is located in as the township of record.
Okay, thank you. So is there any further discussion or questions?
I'd just like to throw out a couple of things, and then I think we should get through the findings of fact. But,
Yes.
as I look at this, there appears to be some trees. Obviously, the cattle found them, which is a kind of a natural buffer. And the well thing, that's really not up to us. The neighbor with the Quonset, we haven't heard from, evidently, which would be the closest neighbor. And I can't see why, because this was built a lot all these years on the tax roll, and now to deny it because we changed the rules just doesn't seem quite kosher to me. If that's going to be the case, then they should lower the taxes on this parcel. But anyway, I think we should do the findings of fact and hash it out.
Okay. The variance request is in harmony with the intent and purpose of the ordinance. Are we in agreement on that?
I go with yes.
I would say yes.
Yes.
The variance request is consistent with the comprehensive plan.
I would say yes. I agree with the staff's comment.
Yes.
The applicant has established that there are practical difficulties in complying with the official control and proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner.
I can't argue with that.
I go with the staff recommendation.
Yes.
The variance request is due to special conditions or circumstances unique to the property, not created by owners of the property since enactment of the ordinance.
I think the owner was clear on that.
Yes.
The variance will not alter the essential character of the locality nor substantially impair property values or the public health, safety, or welfare in the vicinity.
I think that was our stumbling block when it came up to this board the first time. And at that time, I was in objection to it because I felt we were going to force the landowner, Mr. Erickson, into getting a variance where I was under the understanding that he wouldn't need a variance if this variance didn't pass. I think there's been clarification today that that hardship is not going to happen. So I don't think it's going to change the character of the land, and I think the neighbors are just going to have to get along with each other.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yep.
Economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties.
Except for the water line, I didn't hear money mentioned.
Yep.
The variance cannot be alleviated by a reasonable method other than a variance and is the minimum variance which would alleviate the practical difficulty.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
The request is not a use variance and does not have the effect of allowing any use that is not allowed in the zoning district, permit a lower degree of flood protection than the regulatory flood protection elevation, or permit standards lower than those required by state law.
Agreed. It's
If
not
that
under-
parcel floods, we need an ark.
True enough.
Why don't you read the condition?
Yes. The owners of the property to which this variance is issued will abide by all representations and commitments made during the permitting process, as well as before the Board of Adjustment, in accordance with all conditions to the variance. The petitioners obtain the required development certificate for a new dwelling and comply with all relevant regulations and standards of the state of Minnesota and Winona County. The petitioners obtain the required septic permit and comply with all relevant regulations and standards of the state of Minnesota and Winona County. The following statement, as written, shall be placed on the Board of Adjustment permit. Owners, residents, and other users of property in this zoning district or neighboring properties may be subjected to inconvenience or discomfort arising from normal and accepted agricultural practices and operation, including but not limited to noise, odors, dust, operation of machinery of any kind, including aircraft, the storage and disposal of manure or the application of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides. Owners, residents, and users of this property or neighboring property should be prepared to accept such inconvenience or discomfort and possibly injury from normal operations, and are hereby put on official notice that the state right to farm law, Minnesota Statute 561.19, may bar them from obtaining a legal judgment against any such normal operations. Having been in agreement with the 8 criteria, do we have a motion to approve this variance with the conditions?
I'd so move.
A second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Wendy.
Madam Chair, does that include an adoption of the findings of fact as presented? Just to clarify, is the motion to adopt the findings of fact as presented and approve
Right.
the variance with the conditions as recommended?
Yes?
Can I interject one thing before we vote,
Yes?
Madam Chair? I come from a family I'm the 6th generation, or my kids are, that has lived within less than 100 feet from a feedlot. And we're all pretty healthy, and it's all about management and all the other rules and regulations that different entities have put forth, and common sense of the folks living in the country. So I think it'll be fine.
All right. Well, we do have a motion and a second to approve the petition with conditions. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Mr. Compton, the Board of Adjustment has approved a petition. Mr. Menting, all decisions by the Board of Adjustment in granting variances or in hearing appeals from any administrative order, requirement, decision, or determination shall be final except that any aggrieved person or persons or any department, board, or commission of the jurisdiction or of the state, excuse me, shall have the right to appeal within 30 days after receipt of notice of the decision to the district court in the county in which the land is located on questions of law and fact. Any party that would like to submit an appeal to the decision rendered at the public hearing must do so to the district court. Planning and Environmental Services is not responsible for filing the appeal or obtaining representation by counsel for the petitioner.
Could make a motion, we adjourn.
We are going to hear, we added,
Oh, yep, good thing we wrote
So-
that down.
Madam Chair and Board of Adjustment members, my voice went down an octave since the proceedings started, so it's no wonder that your packet wasn't amended properly to include this item, but I do apologize for that oversight. So item 10 is to discuss the change of venue and/or time of the February meeting. As I stated earlier, the capacity here is 96, but that includes Board of Adjustment members and staff and from the Planning and Environmental Services Department and legal staff, as well as press. And so in the interest of possibly being able to hear testimony, factual, additions to the petitions for the dailies and any other petitions that might be coming before you, the suggestion was made by County Administrator Fritz to find out if the Town Center was available. We have availed ourselves of a couple of the larger auditoriums in the city in the past, and that facility holds 250 people, is available. The Sheriff's Department has indicated that they could send representatives to the meeting, as well as I mentioned earlier, HBI can tape. So that is what is before you. The time is obviously 1 o'clock that we normally meet. We can meet at a different time if everything is properly noticed, of course. My first day of work was a planning commission meeting with a feedlot to the animal cap that was, I believe, Holden Farms, and that went until 1 a.m. I'm sure that the decisions that were made at that meeting were based on the factual account that was put before the deliberative body. I will say that in the audience, I was not as sharp as I was at 7 p.m. At 1 a.m. But the time, is up to you folks. At this point, we would have the Town Center for the entire day, because if it's more than a couple of hours, you're paying for the day anyway. So that is item number 10 before you.
Have you considered like the Lewiston Community Center? I know you like me are a little tight with the budget. Is that facility is pretty reasonable, maybe even free, and it is centrally located. Have you considered that?
This is the only investigation that we've done at this point because of the need for taping facilities. That was recommended, I guess, at this point.
Maybe the Winona Middle School auditorium?
That there could be several possibilities out there that's that could be investigated. This is our recommendation at this point from the department.
Okay.
Okay with
Do we
this?
need a motion now to approve this, or what do we?
Well, should it be at 7 at night, or should it be at 1 in the afternoon, or 6 at night?
I believe consistency is good. We've met at 1 o'clock ever since I've been on this board, and I believe that's what we should leave it at.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And Town Center, people good with that?
I don't know. I've never seen it or been to it, so I'm a little at a loss to decide.
Well, I believe originally, when we added this to the agenda, I said into a larger venue, and I believe it's up to the administration.
Yeah, right.
To
That's
figure out what that
good with
is.
us. So,
That's the information that I've gathered to this point. I certainly can investigate others. The cost is about $350 plus the taping. So I'll squeeze the budget in another spot to accommodate if the Board of Adjustment, thinks that would be an okay location.
Do you have plenty of parking?
Yes. There's 2 parking lots in that location, and parking can extend into the neighborhood, I think, without greatly inconveniencing the neighbors.
Better than here.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So, Kay, would it be appropriate if others of us have questions about this upcoming meeting in February? Is that okay? I mean, I have questions. Well, I certainly do now, but, do you really expect there'll be so many people that would need a facility that large?
Madam Chair, yes, I do, actually. And but even if we had fewer people than could fit in this room, and Holden Farms was completely jammed, and I'm not sure that at the time we remembered to bring a clicker to check for fire safety. Erring on the side of both fire safety as well as to make sure that folks that would like to have a voice have the opportunity to do so in an orderly fashion. I think it will be less impactful on county business, both down in the lobby and upstairs here for our counter if we were to move to a venue such as the Tao Center.
And my other thought, is that typically we get our electronic packet on Friday, or if you speak to Ann, you can come down and pick it up, so you have hard copy, or it goes in the mail and we get it Monday, thereabouts. I'm going to presume this is going to be a bigger packet. And so that's a lot of material to go through in a really short order and expect to do it justice. Plus, I'm imagining there will be comments submitted. Is it possible that we get preliminary information as we go along? Or how is that going to work? I mean, I don't know if anyone else feels like that might be a little overwhelming, but I do.
Madam Chair, of course, the staff report is underway right now with Feedlot Officer Carly McGinty. And also the legal department is preparing information for findings of facts. So that is not complete at this time because also the EAW ruling from the MPCA had to be completed before, we could finish our work too. So our goal is to have this come out sooner than the absolute last, possible minute. But we also want to make sure that the information contained within it for the decision makers is as accurate as possible, and that we have the advantage of the legal department being able to weigh in and evaluate and review the staff report, which we have done a couple of times already in the process of trying to streamline it where it can be streamlined and increase its accuracy. And I have to say, our new Feedlot Officer, Carly McGinty, I'm saying your name again so you can get used to it, has received compliments from staff already on the quality of her work, and that's consistent with her inspections over the last few months too. So I'm not really dancing around your question as much as we will expedite matters with as much prudence as we can. Does our legal department have any comments about that, or have I got it?
Anyone else have questions?
No, I'd like to make a motion that we allow Kay and her staff to do the best they can for a site and a time, and trust that she'll do that.
Second that.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'd like to thank everyone for their patience as I stumbled through.
We got to vote on it.
Call the vote.
You'll get better.
So, let's see, we have a motion.
All in favor, say aye. Would be
Yes. All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed?
There we go.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.